Subject of this question: how do I return to the present when the ego takes over? The question is, at times ego takes over and I know it has, but I cannot return to the present using your gateways. I can't even get some space to observe it. Is there another way? Now, the question is here, are you aware that you have been taken over by the ego in the form, I suppose, of a strong mind movement that drags you along with it? Getting involved in some stream of thought? Generating probably whatever fear, anger, whatever it may be, or the ego may take over in the form of a reaction or an overreaction to something that's happening around you, or what another human being says, does, or fails to say, or fails to do, whatever it is. It's a reaction that takes you over, that is consists both of thought and emotion coming together. An unconscious reaction, it's all unconscious. Now, you, the questioner, are asking, how can I return to the present? I cannot seem to return to the present using your gateways. Now, it seems to, you say here that at times the ego takes over, and I know it has, but I cannot return to the present using your gateways. That seems to imply that even while it's happening, you still know that that's happening. For many other people, what they experience is that they only become aware after that particular egoic reaction or that particular powerful mind stream has subsided, and then they regain, so to speak, some consciousness. And they look back and say, what was that all about? How could I do that? Or for hours I've been indulging in this thought about what I'm going to do to that person who insulted me, or whatever the stream of thought may be. Many people wake up afterwards and then say, oh, how could I have gone that, or how could I have reacted in such a way? It was so unnecessary, so absurd, so unconscious. But of course now it's too late. Of course it's too late. You can't undo that, but all you can do then is be present now. Don't judge yourself for something that you did in the past. There's no point. You would just add more thought identification and more unconsciousness again. When you judge your own unconsciousness, you get more of the same. It's enough to see it, and there's some presence returns. So presence comes back after you've been taken over by a reaction or mind stream or an emotional field. Or it can be that you seem to imply in your question that you actually know what's happening in the middle of it, in the middle of the reaction, or in the middle of that thought stream. There's a tiny part of you perhaps that knows that you are getting lost in a thought stream or a reaction. So there's this, perhaps there is, the question seems to imply, that there is a spark of the witnessing consciousness in the background. And that's a huge step forward for, in most people's growth of consciousness. For a certain period of time, they don't regain awareness until afterwards. But if awareness comes in the middle of it, that's a big step forward. Even though you cannot stop the unconscious movement, it is a step forward in your awakening process. So there is, at the back of your mind somewhere, there's a witnessing consciousness that, for example, knows that you're in the midst of an angry outburst, and while you're shouting at your partner or whoever it may be, there's that little part of you in the back that is watching. Wow. Powerless to stop it, but at least you're not totally in that unconscious movement. This seems to be where you are at. And so the question arises, what do I do? How do I stop it? It is already a help to know what I just described. You may not have fully seen how it works, that when you are in the grip of unconsciousness and you know it as it's happening, so next time you observe yourself to see that's the case, then that knowing, when you acknowledge the knowing that's there in the background, then it tends to grow. So you acknowledge the knowing directly, and you can sense that part of you, so to speak, that's the light of consciousness. And then it grows. What then happens usually is the unconscious movement becomes shorter. So instead of being angry for 3 hours or even 3 days and thinking angry thoughts, and by thinking angry thoughts creating more angry emotion, which creates more angry thoughts, which creates more angry emotion. That's called the vicious circle. Instead of, let's say, it's 3 hours and you're only angry for half an hour or 1 hour. As the light of consciousness comes in, the periods of unconsciousness tend to become shorter. You may not be able to stop it, nor is it necessarily desirable, because willpower is definitely not what you're looking for here. And then a day may come when you're able to observe the arising of a reaction or the beginning of a mind stream that wants to take you over, and you don't follow it, you don't go there, it wants to draw you in, but you're not being drawn into it. You stay alert, and you can sense the pull that wants you to go into that mind stream, or the reaction in a situation, just as you're about to shout something back or make that angry phone call, get back to them and tell them what you really think of them, there suddenly comes in awareness, and that gives you space between. You can still do it, but you allow yourself some space. Space arises, and 2-3 minutes later, you realize you actually have a choice. You can pick up the phone and talk, or you can wait a little until the entire energy has subsided. The element of choice comes in as consciousness grows, and you also begin to see what works and what does not work. Unconscious people cannot see that. They believe that what actually doesn't work is very helpful. For example, to lie awake at night worrying. If you're very unconscious, you believe that you are doing something that is absolutely necessary to keep your life going. You need to. And as consciousness comes in, you begin to see that what you have been indulging in unconsciously not only serves no purpose, no useful purpose, it also creates a very unpleasant energy field. And if you're present in the body, you can sense that there are many contractions in the body as a result of those thoughts. And if you do it for long enough, for a few years, it's much more likely that the body will manifest some illness. The body just cannot stand your mind anymore. It's a dreadful thing for a body which otherwise would work beautifully, governed by the overall intelligence of the body, the energy field, how the mind can interfere with that. So as you become conscious, you recognize how dysfunctional the unconscious states are. It's only from consciousness that you can see that. You also see the futility of reactivity in situations and relationships. Whereas before you thought your reaction was absolutely necessary and you really taught them a lesson this time. Of course you didn't. They haven't learned anything. You contributed to their unconsciousness and to yours. That's the lesson. So you see that the reactivity doesn't actually have a useful purpose at all. It creates more of the same, more conflict, more dysfunction. And so an element of choice comes in, where you can see, is that what I choose? Am I choosing even just a simple irritation? You're standing in a line at the bank or the supermarket, and the teller or the cashier seems to be so slow, and he or she talks to the people who come to her. She actually engages them in conversation. She says, "It's a nice day, isn't it?" And you get angry waiting there. Why is she talking to them? And you get more and more irritated. And almost the outburst is coming any moment. There's 2 people ahead of you and you're going to say something in a minute. And suddenly you realize what's happening, what you're doing. And then you have a choice. And the question there is, do I actually, by choice, do I enter this state of consciousness? Is that my choice? You're really asking a question, am I free? And then you see you are free. If enough consciousness is there, you're free. And you have a choice. And you can recognize dysfunction as dysfunction and then not go there. No suppression, transcending. You recognize dysfunction as dysfunction and don't go there. And then you suddenly see how little freedom you had before you were conscious, and how little, but no freedom an unconscious human being has. They think they are free, but they don't choose to be absolutely angry or irritated in that situation. It just happens to them. These are patterns that are built into them, become activated in certain situations, and they are acting out that. No choice whatsoever. And the fact that it's dysfunctional doesn't even occur to them. They are so identified with it that they become it. So that's how the unconsciousness proliferates in this world. That's how enormous conflict situations develop. I'm only mentioning a relatively insignificant incident, but the basic pattern is the same. And when a few million people live in that state of consciousness in one country, and a few million in that state of consciousness in another country, then you have an enormous amount of conflict, up to physical conflict, war, and so on. So choice comes in as consciousness is there. When you ask the question and you ask, there's nothing you can do, although you know that it's happening, you say, but there's nothing you can do, that may not be entirely the case. You have to look again more closely when it happens. And perhaps use situations that are not absolutely overpowering. Begin working with minor situations and see that there is something you can do. Just the irritation, for example, I mentioned, you're standing in a lineup wherever and it's not moving, or it's moving very slowly, or the traffic jam, a minor situation, and realize that when the reaction comes and you know it's there, then you have a choice. And then you have the choice to actually use one of the gateways, as I sometimes describe it. You have the choice of following your thoughts to where they want to take you, into more dysfunctional thinking, or you have the choice of, for example, taking a few conscious breaths, so your conscious attention moves to the breath. Or you have the choice to feel the energy field in your entire body. You have that. Once you just need a small amount of awareness to know that. Or you have the choice to put your attention on sense perceptions and look at the tree and the sky and the people around you. Become present. Experiment with it. You probably have more choice already than you realize. Sometimes the thought comes into one's head, I can't be present now, but that may not be a true thought. It's the mind speaking.